Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, 9:30 on the East Coast time zone where I'm here in New York. And this is Goaldigger live on LinkedIn. I'm Cate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary. And I'm really excited about today's guest. Number one, she is doing incredible things, and we're going to talk about that. But number two, I was actually introduced to her from a former guest as well as partner of Luminary, is Soso from Black Women Talk Tech. So everyone, please welcome Yemi Adewumi. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you this morning.
And you are zooming in from Washington, D.C.
From Washington, D.C., yes.
And that's where you're based. That's where you're running the company, everything.
Yeah. Our company is fully remote. I'm from upstate New York, outside of Albany, and I've been in DC for about almost 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the company. We're going to talk about your journey. We're going to talk about being a Black woman founder, as well as being venture backed, and get into a lot of different questions in the 30 minutes we have together. So the first thing I always ask, and because I don't read bios, and it's really important for women to share their story, is can you tell the audience a little bit about your personal journey? What led you to today where we're at in Civic Eagle?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. I often think about my journey, and I could not have planned for it. But what I will say is that I've always focused on pursuing what I'm most interested and passionate about, and what I'm most skilled at, and not settling for less, I guess, if that makes sense. So I started my career in public policy. I went to college wanting to be a lawyer. I ended up going down the more policy and public sector route. I got my master's in public administration and started my career as a policy researcher at the New York State Legislature. Being from Albany, government and public service and state agency work, all that kind of stuff, I was very familiar with, and it just suited my skills and interests as far as serving communities. And it's really interesting to be able to go through grad school, studying the master's in public administration, as well as having this hands-on, firsthand experience while working full time. And I got the opportunity to really see what I was really being able to take what I was applying, learning in school, and applying it to my workspace and my career goals. And to be honest, I grew pretty frustrated. I grew kind of disillusioned with some of the paths I could take within the public sector. And I started to look into more creative spaces, some of my creative interests. I started to pick up photography and then graphic design to be able to promote my photography, pretty much just as a creative outlet, and also a way to make side money, extra.
Right.
Extra. Yeah. So that was when I started to learn a lot about entrepreneurship and running a business. But what was great around another important thing that happened around that time that I couldn't have asked for was that my friend at the time, and now my business partner and CEO, he had an idea for creating a mobile app that would connect everyday people to information about policy and get their take and perspective, so that policy could be more efficient, effective, applicable to people that really need it. So he reached out to me to be able to kind of provide that kind of policy research lens to the project. And we'll call it a project for now, because we weren't necessarily fully a business. And we, in that journey of putting together this app, I started to realize that my skills in graphic design could apply to how the app looked and functioned. And it really just threw me back to my interest in technology. I would say I'm a pretty early adopter of new things. I'll try almost anything for the sake of innovation and efficiency, right? For the sake of saving time, saving effort, and embracing the fact that technology exists that can do our work better for us or help us do our work better. So in this process of learning how to design this mobile app, I fell in love with the whole industry of product design. UI, UX. I found a lot of synergies actually between my skills as a policy researcher to my skills as a product user researcher, and someone who is taking experiments, making experiments on how to solve a problem essentially. And I found those synergies really helped me transition. And so in 2016, I moved to New York City and fully embraced myself as a designer. And I started out as a junior designer at a design agency. I moved on to a small startup and then a medium-sized startup. And all the while we were tinkering with Civic Eagle, trying to figure out how to grow our impact with that app. We had launched it, we had users, but we weren't really seeing impact. We weren't seeing a lot of retained users. We weren't seeing revenue because we didn't have a business model for it. And
little problem.
Yeah. It was a great, launching for us to be able to realize like this is something that we want to work on as far as creating a solution for a better understanding of public policy, essentially,
Right.
a better, more effective policy through the advantages that we have in technology. So now I'm like transitioning into becoming a designer. I'm building my portfolio. I'm building the experience of being at a startup, of being coming up with solutions and doing the user research and talking to engaged users to improve a product. All the while with Civic Eagle, we were thinking about really rethinking how we create impact, and we started to look at the value that we could provide to people who are policy researchers, people who are advocates and organizations, and people who are government affairs, professional government affairs folks who are working within organizations or companies to get this work done as well. So we saw that there, a trend where, these marketing teams, they have HubSpot and they have tools that help them get the work done. Sales teams have had Salesforce for decades where they're able to, optimize their work products by using technology. And we saw an opportunity for us to do that same kind of work for government affairs teams and nonprofit organizations and trade groups, anyone that has a team of or is working on policy research analysis. And we found that space. We found a need. We found a pain point that needed to be addressed. And at this point now, we've been able to scale the company to 13 full-time employees. We have raised $3 million to date. And we have almost 70 customers that range from nonprofit organizations like Fair Fight to membership-based organizations like chambers of commerces, as well as corporations and businesses. And our goal really is to bring and access to state and federal legislation. So what our tool does now is that we aggregate state legislation and as well as the federal Congress legislation in the House and Senate. We put it all into one system that allows our users to be able to optimize their time, work more effectively by communicating very efficiently with their colleagues and other stakeholders, both internally and externally, and allows them to monitor and keep track of anything that's changing in the bills that they're following. And so those are all key components of their day jobs and that they need to be effective in their roles.
I mean, it's, as someone who's not in that space, but who was a political science major, I worked on the Hill, all of that. This, you think about the amount of paper, right, and research and the work, and not only that, the number of employees that had to be hired to do all of this, right, to sift through. And now you are literally, you've created something that is almost a one-stop shop to be able to do that for these organizations that also may not have the funds necessary to hire a bunch of people in order to go and do all that.
Yep, exactly. And that's where we really stem from, is to be able to empower particularly organizations that don't have those resources to be able to be on top of every single change that impacts an issue that they care about, because as we see more and more, it's becoming more and more apparent. And what I'm excited about in this political climate that we're in is that it's at least bringing awareness to how policy touches everyone, and that was our main goal from the beginning.
Yeah,
is that policy is everywhere, and that in order for there to be equity, folks need to have equity in influence on that policy, right? So being able to know specifically what the language is in a piece of legislation that will impact us for decades to come, like this is really important stuff. And it shouldn't be as difficult as it is to really understand the laws that help.
What's out there, exactly, that affect you and their organizations and the constituents, right? So I want to kind of roll it back a little bit on a couple of things that you touched on. So you are in a non-traditional sector, also in technology, raised venture capital, and you and your co-founder are Black, right? A very small percentage, we know, 0.06% of Black women raise money. And thanks to Asoso and Black Women Talk Tech and the amazing research that they're doing and the report they're putting out, getting awareness around that. But you're also in a non-traditional sector, right, for what you look like and what you do. How has that been? How has that journey been for you as you've built this company, but also, built this credibility for you as a founder, as a leader, as a chief operating officer? What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, it's a journey that I'm very familiar with from when I was born. From grade school, I was one of the only Black females in my classes. And my I guess experience always, because the only experience I know, I can't compare it to anything else, and it's hard for me to just not be grateful for the journey I've been on, and I'm intentional and deliberate about that journey by just doing excellent work. And I rarely have to think about, I rarely think about, I try to not to think about it too often. Like, okay, I am the minority in the situation, regardless of demographics. But like you mentioned, we are a venture-backed company that has touch points with government, and that scares investors, and it scares,
Right.
It's not super attractive. You're right. Like civic technology isn't a sexy or super popular space.
Right.
Right. So even that is, being a minority. And so I think it's really just been about proving ourselves, for better, for worse. I think for better in the sense that it actually means that what we're building is legit, and that we do have to outperform, overperform, which can be exhausting. To not have some slack, to not have some flexibility. We definitely feel that sometimes, but the end product is that we have the traction, we have the customers, we have the product, we have the designs, and so the journey has been challenging from a standpoint of, we have to prove what we're building. We have to prove that valuation of our company.
Right.
And we have to prove when we, are recruiting and hiring folks, we have to prove that we're on the right mission. And so when you're focusing so much on doing it right, focusing on doing it right as early as possible, you do kind of sacrifice that level of experimentation where you can kind of have that risk of failing. On the flip side, though, all of those levels of having to prove our business and what we're building for folks helps us attract the best talent, the best investors who believe in us and believe in what we're building. It clears out the weeds, I guess. It clears out.
I totally hear you, and it's the right investors, and it's the right talent, and it's the right customers, right? Because they're clearly there for a reason. You talked earlier in your opening about not settling for less, right? In anything that you're doing, right? Whether it's building this company, whether it was through grad school, and where did that come from? Is that something that it was instilled in you from when you were little?
Stubbornness, I think. Part of it is stubbornness and just being hyper. I'm aware that I don't thrive in situations where I have to compromise too much of what I don't like, or compromise on doing things I don't like. So, I was younger, so many times my parents it's a stubbornness because there's one time when I was a kid that I got a job, I think I was 16 or 17. I trained for it for 5 days or a week or something. It was 2 weeks of training. And then on day one, I quit because I just didn't like it. And so and not that I couldn't do it, but I think there it's a level of awareness that I think I must have been grooming as a kid. Right. After I got to college, when I was in college, and I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. I think it was just more building I had a confidence in my decision-making models and like how I reason with what I want to do and what I don't want to do. I fully have had to embrace my strengths because otherwise it's like you're just focused on your weaknesses and that's not great. So when I say I don't sell, it's more so like it's in the sense of I like to take risks if it means knowing what I don't want to do is just as much as valuable as what I do, knowing what I do want to do. And so I think I've always followed that model for being like, I can try this. It's, if it doesn't work out, I'll try something else. And I think it's something that started as a kid. I was really into extracurricular activities. My parents really supported me being able to try all types of activities and school clubs and travel and stuff like that. So just being able to have, I'm very intentional about having like a global perspective on things and expanding my knowledge base. And because I have that kind of foundation, I do think that taking risks, being able to say no to things comfortably, allows me to feel comfortable in doing that.
And you own it, right? You embrace that. You lean into those qualities, which I think is so important, and particularly for women, right? Don't shy away from those. I've been called aggressive my whole life, and I don't think that's a bad word. There's a reason I had a successful career in banking. I think there's a reason I started this company. But I've sort of embraced that about myself. Like you're embracing this stubbornness and like never settling. And that's, I think, important as you're building a company. So let's talk about building this company, because the company was started in 2015. We're now in 2021. And one of the things you said when we were talking before was those couple of years, those 4 years between 2015 and 2019, kind of stops and starts and doing all this, it really allowed you the experience to build a company before that company sort of evolved into what it is today. So there's so many founders and small business owners and entrepreneurs that think they need to have an overnight success. They need to start and finish with what they had in the beginning of that business plan. I love this idea of building. You've learned how to build a company. So will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love this topic so much because I think it's also just a great analogy or metaphor for life as well in all areas. But in the startup world, they often say like fail fast and fail often within the design thinking models of like how you build products and solutions. It's an iterative process. And so looking back on it now in hindsight, right? Like now looking back on it, me and my team can look back with so much gratitude and like love for that really challenging time in our business. We weren't sure what we were doing. My business partner, who's our CEO, super stressed. He put a lot of personal money into our business between 2015 and 2019 before we were able to raise capital. And so it often does feel like real failure. But, the flip side is there are lessons in those, kind of failings. When you are starting out, you may even be coming from industry, right? You may be building a company where you know the ins and out of the people that you're serving and who it's for, but you still have to, there's always going to be parts of business that you are not going to be privy to. Like, there are people who've been in business for 30 years that still don't know certain things, right? And then business changes.
Absolutely.
We were really, I'm thinking back on that time, we really were aware of our gaps. We knew that engineering work, that's probably the first thing, right? When you talk about technology, there's this misconception about like how engineering works and how engineers develop products. So that was definitely a learning curve we had to figure out, like realizing that there needs to be a certain level of effort when you're building a product as far as testing features, doing usability testing with people you're serving. And these are just hiccups that you come across through launching and through failing. People are going to tell you, oh, the app crashed, or I couldn't log in, and all of these things. It's about like flipping that perspective into thinking these are things that have helped me improve, because once I address this problem, my product's me better, right? And so I think in those 4 years, we really had to be students again. We really had to seek mentorship and advice. We went through an accelerator, went through 3 accelerator programs in 2018. And that was a sacrifice we had to take as far as giving up equity in our business in order to go through a program that did level us up. Like, it did teach us a lot of these things that were necessary for us to get to where we are today. Our mobile app was cool. People supported it, but they weren't our users, right? You have to then understand user segmentation and how to build personas. Then you got to think about product marketing and how you speak to these personas, and the messaging and the copy. And so what we ended up finding is that over those 4 years, we had to recruit support through mentorship and programs, but also talent as far as other people who were better than us, literally better than us in other spaces, to come on board. And I think that was the biggest learning, at least for myself, where you think that starting a company is glamorous.
Yeah.
Because your name is on it. But what's more beautiful is having a team of people, like literally like a whole, like I'd rather not be in it actually, as far as like name goes. And I'm more proud of the fact that we were able to convince and sell this idea to other talented people who then can step in and be like, oh, I'm going to commit to doing engineering and testing and user research. So I think in that 4 years, it's really just about knowing your gaps and filling them with people that can address them, because there is no use in you spinning your wheels on something you're not strong at. And I think that kind of goes back to self-awareness of like, what are your skills? What can you bring to a startup, as opposed to the ego of it all, like I can do it all by myself, because it's not really about that. It's about doing more of what you're good at and love, and finding support in areas that, are the opposite of that.
Yeah, and in your role, you own product design. You also, a non-traditional, you own growth. And one of the questions in the chat is, how much have you had to change your policy within the company for your business to succeed? Because as you had that growth, right, from when you started to where you are, when you started, and I think you alluded to it, you clearly would have issue around cash flow and personal investing and everything that you're having to do. But how has that changed? I think just to make sure your business is a success, because you got the product side, but then you've got to go to market, right? You've got to get clients to generate revenue and income so that you can continue to reinvest and build a business.
Yeah, I love this question because it's super timely. Actually, yesterday I just had a conversation with some senior leadership folks at our team, and we are going through a transition, another inflection, another transition in our company, and that happens at least once a year, or sometimes more frequently. But essentially, me and my business partners, my co-founders especially, have had to really be flexible and understand that it is a process. And so my role today is 100% different than my role last year. Maybe not 100%. It's different, but right. And that was different than my role a year ago. And I probably will have a different kind of responsibility next year or even before then. But essentially, this process has been about letting go, actually. It's really been about delegating. First, it sounds like delegating. Well, I'm just going to have somebody do this. I'm not good at this, I'm going to do that, right?
Right.
But then it turns into trust, where you're like, I trust that my teammate owns this. And giving them ownership of something I'm passionate about. I love design, but I'm actually currently hiring for a designer, because the reality is that my purpose has become bigger. It's become larger. I'm not just between 2018 and even 2019, we're just launching our beta, launching for a few customers. Now my role really is about supporting my team. And that often does not look like designing. It does not look like writing. It does not look like marketing efforts. It really is about how am I inspiring, or being clearly communicating to the folks I'm delegating tasks to, or giving ownership of tasks to. So it's about organizing processes a lot. It's about
which isn't glamorous most of the time.
But the cool thing is, and this is why I'm just feel so blessed, is that I enjoy these kinds of things. Like even the non-glamorous stuff, it's still problem solving, right? It's like now I'm thinking about it from like my new problem to solve is how to optimize my team or make my team feel more comfortable or make my team more effective. And that's the problem I'm solving today versus last year. The problem I was solving was like how to hire for my first product manager.
So that product person in you is always having that problem solving lens, right? Yeah. So I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to get to the Black Women Talk Tech piece, right? Because that's what brought us together. And one of the big problems that Black Women Talk Tech is trying to solve, bring awareness to, expose is the challenge that Black women have in the tech space, right? And tech space is quite large, right? That could be a lot of different things. So what has been your role in that? And where do you see it helping other particularly Black women founders in the technology world?
Yeah. So I'm so grateful for Black Women Talk Tech, the Talk Tech Association. I was introduced to organization a few years ago when I was living in New York City, and when I was transitioning into this space. And I'm self-taught. I'm really into like learning. I'm really into like books, podcasts, absorbing. But part of my learning is through community, and it's about finding people who are either at your level and are learning, trying to learn with you, or are a little bit above you and are reaching back. And so, Black Women Talk Tech has been a great pipeline for me to find women in tech across different areas. Right, like you mentioned, the organization is geared towards any folks who are in any sector of technology, students who are trying to merge into technology or non-traditional, any type of resource. We just serve as a resource for folks to be able to find community. We host events. I can take a step back. I serve as the chapter co-lead here in DC. The pandemic prevented us from hosting a lot of events last year. This year, the model is that the larger global community, right? So Black Women Talk Tech is an international organization of chapters in London. So they'll be hosting events monthly. So follow Black Women Talk Tech to be aware of those global events. And then once a quarter, the DC chapter will be hosting virtual events to support the local chapter here. And that, it's not just the DC chapter, it's district, DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, so any women who want to be a part of that community, please reach out. Black Women Talk Tech has on their website a subscription and sign up process for you to be on the mailing list and be aware of these events. And hopefully in a post-pandemic world, we'll be able to do more in-person things. Our event that we did at the end of last year was a pitch workshop, and it helps women really think about the different types of pitches, because that's something that you wouldn't have understood if you were new to the space, right? Like there isn't just one type of pitch. You have pitches for different contexts.
Right.
Yeah, and so we hosted an event that with a speaker who has tons of experience with that and is able to share her knowledge with the community. And so more things like that will be coming down the pipeline. And reach out to me or directly to Black Women Talk Tech to sign up for updates on that.
And I put in the chat earlier, and I'll put it up there again, the Instagram handle for Black Women Talk Tech. The other thing that I would recommend anyone watching, listening, is to download their report on the new face of a founder. It's incredible. It is the first of its kind. It came out late last year, just around, what is the landscape for Black women in tech across all sort of sectors. And then I've also put up there where to follow you, Yemi, as well as to learn more at Civic Eagle. I'm excited to watch the journey and see how this evolves in the company and you, and really appreciate you being on today. This has been incredible, and it's so inspiring what you've done in a short period of time and where you continue to go. So hopefully at some point we will meet in person, and know that me and the whole Luminary community is cheering you on from the side.
Thank you so much, Kay. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. It's been cathartic to be able to kind of dump this all out. And thank you to all the listeners and viewers. Really appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help assist, especially if you're interested in products and getting into the space.
Amazing. Well, everyone, have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Please wear a mask. I say this often. We're almost there. And Yemi, thank you again. Good luck, and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everyone. Bye-bye.